Welcome everyone to my second video on assignment 7056, writing about writing 2. As you can see, I'm in the instructional wiki looking at the assignment prompt for 7056. So I'm going to scroll down to tasks. This video is going to be focusing on task item number 2, creating the memo in which you reflect on how you can apply lesson 8 to your own writing from assignment 7063. So you should have already read lesson 8 and figured out what it means and taken your own notes on that. Now what you have to do is, instead of in task 1 being able to summarize the content, now you have to show me that you can apply it. And so for your evidence, you can draw from any of the documents that you wrote or are writing in assignment 7063. So it's really best to tackle this memo, memo number 2, after you at least have a draft of 7063. Okay. So if you haven't done that yet, I would recommend that you pause this video and go back and work on 7063 first. It'll make it easier. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do is going back to our Moodle page, and under week 2, I have an outline of what I'd like the structure of this memo to look like, and it's right here. So under week 2, underneath assignment 7056, this is where you would turn the work in, but underneath that, this is my outline for 7056. So that should guide you through what to write paragraph by paragraph. And this is basically what it looks like. So again, this should be a memo written to your boss, and in the from line should be your name, and you should have an appropriate RE line or subject line. So this is in response to a request, so an RE line as opposed to subject would be appropriate. And notice that, I'm clearly indicating that this is a different memo than, say, the executive summary. Okay, so here's the outline. So if you open up that Word document I showed you a moment ago, this is basically what would pop up. And the goal I'd like for you to reach for is being able to apply at least 2 of the tips or rules from the chapter to your own writing. And so, as we remember from our wiki page on openings, middles, and closings, you should have a structure to your memo. So here's that page on openings, middles, and closings. So the opening should basically set up the context of what you're about to say. So at the very least, your memo should have a thesis. And that thesis is basically, from this reading, these are the tips or the things I would like to work on for my writing. So notice that one thing that is different between this memo and the executive summary is that executive summaries are meant to be very objective. Executive summaries are not reflections. So in the executive summary, where you can't use I, since this memo is a reflection of your own work, you can use I in this one, and it would be completely appropriate. So, in your intro or your opening, notice that your boss is your audience, and so he likely is already familiar with this text, and since this is a reflection, you probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time re-summarizing what the rules are, but just giving a little bit of context of what rules you found helpful and why. That would be a good intro. So just a couple of sentences. And then you need at least 2 body paragraphs, 1 body paragraph for each rule that you want to cover. And so this is an expansion of the Peck order, so these body paragraphs will have a premise, evidence, and concluding thought. So the first sentence of your body paragraph should be your premise. That's your I think statement. And so very simply just introduce one of the rules that you think your writing could use from the reading. And then for your evidence, remember that we can break that down into describing, quotes, and commentary. And so this is exactly what I would like to see. I would like for you to show or quote from your original text in assignment 7063 a sentence that could use the rule that you introduced. And then I want you to explain how you would revise that quote. And then I want you to show me, as in quote, the revised version of that example. And then once you're done with that, I want you to conclude by saying why you think this version is better for your reader. And if you don't think it's better for your reader, then you should pick something else. You should pick a different example. The whole point of being able to apply these rules is to be able to improve your writing. And so, as I've mentioned in previous videos, a conclusion is all about tying that thought, that paragraph's thought, to the overall purpose of your document. And the overall purpose of this memo is to figure out how we can improve our writing for the experience of our reader. And if you don't think that this revision that you're talking about in the paragraph would do that, then pick something else. Pick a change or a revision that you think would improve the reading experience for your reader. Introduce that rule, show me how you would use it, and then tell me why you think it's better. Okay, so try to be honest and try to be specific. So that would be one paragraph, and then you would skip a line and start a third paragraph. So I want you to be able to prove that you can apply the chapter at least in 2 different instances, preferably using different tips. So for example, if I go to my reading on shape, one of the first rules it tells me is to revise or avoid long openings. Okay, so not putting a lot of clauses at the beginning of a sentence before I get to my main subject. So I can look through my writing for instances where I have a really long clause or several long clauses at the beginning of a sentence before I get to my main subject, and I can say in my memo, first sentence, my premise, one rule that I could benefit from is getting to my subjects faster and avoiding long openings. So that's my premise. And then I would want to prove that with evidence. And so I would then quote from my 7063 text that I had already written an example of a sentence in which I have a really long opening that kind of maybe bores my reader. It takes too long to get to my subject. And then I would talk about what's wrong with that, how I would revise it, and then I would quote a revised version of that sentence and conclude by saying, I think this is much better. Because my reader doesn't get confused halfway through the sentence. Okay, so that's basically an example of what you could do. And so your objective with this memo is to prove to me that you can apply these rules accurately and thoughtfully, that you understand the effects of what you are saying that you're doing. So that's what I will be grading you for. Are you able to follow this paragraph structure? And then are you not only applying the rules accurately, but do you understand why? What effects these rules are having on your writing? Now, if you're worried about maybe one of these body paragraphs not meeting its goal, you can always throw a third one in there just in case. So you can tackle a third rule to make sure that you get at least 2 that are well done. And then go ahead and have a closing. So remember that our opening, middle, and closing structure, you should have a closing paragraph. And so if we look at our wiki page about openings, middles, and closings, it describes a couple of things you can do in a closing, and the one we're going to focus on is item number 1, resolving conflicts. And what this means is basically any conflicting ideas. So so I would definitely want to wait to write this last paragraph until I've written my body paragraphs. And at that point, I would want to reflect, and it's okay for you to think of this as a reflection, on what kind of conflicts you had about whether these rules would work, how do they work together, or how maybe they don't work together, or between how you used to write and how these tips are telling you to write. So I'd like for you to have a little bit of a discussion here in your closing paragraph about conflicts between rules or conflicts between your old writing style and what this chapter is telling you to do. Okay, so I'm really just looking for you to really engage well and think about writing style. So I'll be interested to see what kind of interesting ideas or observations you come up with. Okay, and then once you're done there, that is your reflective memo applying Lesson 8 to your work in 7063. And again, 7063 is due to be turned in before this assignment is, and that's okay. You can start working on, you can read Lesson 8 and maybe apply some of the things you've learned to your drafts in 7063 before you submit it, or not. That's fine. But that is basically memo number 2. So I hope that this video was useful. If you have any questions, please bring those to our virtual classrooms or email me. And if this was helpful, I hope you'll check out my next video on the memo for this assignment, in which you'll be addressing the challenges of self-assessment and media. Okay, good luck.